Welcome to Catalytic Curiosity. I am your host, Jaymes with a Y O'Farron with Catalytic Conversations. I serve remote professionals and hybrid organizations with coaching, consulting, and training to help them reconcile humanity and technology, leading to healthier, digitally integrated lives and teams. On this podcast, I am embarking on a journey of discovery to unearth the roots of digital mastery and maturity beyond mere adulting. I interview insightful and intriguing experts, exploring how we can develop sage-like maturity with intention in today's digitized world. Today's episode brings Orrin Lieuwen to the table to talk about emotional agility in a chaotic digital world. Orrin is a mindset guide helping entrepreneurs and leaders to 10 times their confidence and motivation, say goodbye to their fears and stress, and step into their callings. Orrin spent a decade in faith-based ministry and has a deep passion for helping others and making an impact. Out of his own journey from scarcity thinking to abundance thinking, he has designed the program to help others learn in weeks what it took him years to learn. During our conversation, we talked about relationships and how they interplay with our bodies and our emotional aspects of our body's senses, and how that can lead us to greater presence and awareness in our digital chaotic landscape. So buckle in and join us for this amazing conversation. Well, hello and welcome, Orrin, to our podcast, Catalytic Curiosity. We've had a lot of conversations before, a lot of really fun conversations, and I am looking forward to this one. We've already had a lot of fun getting started and prepping for this. So tell me a bit about you, who you are as a coach, and kind of what inspires you and activates you as a coach.
Thank you, Jaymes. Yes. So my name is Orrin Lieuwen. I hail from Canada, and
a bit north of me.
Yes, a bit north. I was thinking this morning, I was like, I think Canadians are a little bit better than Americans.
You're a bit higher on the polls, you know.
Yeah.
Literally.
So anyways, a little bit about my background. So I grew up in northern British Columbia, in a small town of 2,000 people. And as I graduated high school, I went into ministry. Actually, I was in ministry for about 10 years. And a lot of great experiences, great perspectives, just a deep passion and a sense of purpose and meaning. But often what I found was I wasn't having the impact that I wanted to have, or I lacked some of the tools of connecting with myself and connecting with others. And there's a lot really behind that we might get into in this upcoming conversation.
Yeah.
But as I shifted into business and starting my coaching practice and really helping people, I realized that I needed to go deeper for myself. And as I went deeper, I had to unpack different layers, getting all the way down to the things that I'm believing, particularly about myself. The things that I'm value. What are the values that I'm living out of in my day-to-day experiences? And how am I actually
the values that you are living out of? That's a really good phrase. I want to highlight that. That's good.
And so ultimately, for most of my life, I felt like I was holding myself back. I felt like, man, there's a lot of desires that I have. I really do want to succeed, and I was moving out, but there was this belief that it wasn't really going to work, and that was in the background, and that was like a chain that was pulling me back. And so every time I try something, I wouldn't be able to fully give myself to it, and then oftentimes it wouldn't work out. And so being able to break that chain and really come to a place of inner freedom and confidence and joy, that's what I have experienced, and that's what I love. That's my message, Jaymes. I want to help other people experience what I have experienced.
Yeah. Isn't that's so much of whenever there's authentic sharing of value, it's a sharing of experience. Like, I've experienced this product and I want you to experience this product too. I experienced this service, I want you to experience it too, because you believe in it authentically. This is something that is good for you in your instance. And so I want you to also share in that. It's a matter of giving. It's a relational type thing. And when you think about it in those terms, it doesn't come across nearly as salesy.
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
So
It's invitational.
yes, exactly. That's a
Yeah.
really good way of putting it. Very true. Very true. So tell me a bit about like what there's so many different coaches out there, all these different aspects of it. What are some of the key aspects that are unique to you? You know, you work with NLP, you work
Mhm.
with some like somatic type things. Like what are some of the different components that you bring into play as that are in your toolkit that are unique to you or
Mhm.
reasonably unique?
Yeah, where I really dive into, I would say there's three areas that I dive into that I work with. The first would be values, is what's like, as we just talked about, what are the
Mhm.
values that you're living in this moment?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes when we run into, say, an inner conflict,
Hmm.
um, there's values, there's things that are happening under the surface that once you become aware of them, it clears up that conflict.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, the second thing that I work with people is beliefs. As I mentioned, the negative beliefs, the self-limiting beliefs that I had about myself, and how they really just hindered me moving forward.
Hmm.
And that the mindset of scarcity,
Hmm.
that never
Yeah.
feeling like I'm enough, never feeling like I can do enough,
Hmm.
and changing that to beliefs that fuel a mindset of abundance.
Hmm.
And then the third thing that I work with is I call it resourcefulness. Really, it is accessing your inner resources. Really, is I use it as a code for that emotional agility.
Ah,
Being
yes.
able to manage your emotions, being able to process negative emotions quickly and healthily, being able to cultivate positive emotions
Hmm.
in a way that's going to serve you and give you momentum
Hmm.
towards achieving your goals.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that last one because that is something that's really challenging. When you
Mm,
go out, normally we engage with people in person, typically one-on-one or a few in a group, and we're impacted by the emotions of the people around us. They
yeah,
shape. There's a synergy between all of our emotions, like a shared collective emotional pool, you could say.
yeah.
And that's we've been designed to operate within those parameters, and it's difficult for people, even then. But when we translate to online, a lot of times we go off on Facebook. There's hundreds of people, thousands of people, particularly on Twitter, millions of people
Mm,
spewing little micro dots of their emotional content into the world, right?
mm,
So it's almost like static rather than a symphony in a sense.
mm.
There's all these
Interesting.
emotional darts all over the place. And we just get diffracted, just like torn, like all over the place, like it's training us into bipolarism and ADHD,
Mm,
just by stewing in this content. So it seems like this concept of emotional agility, of anchoring ourselves, mastering ourselves, knowing our emotions, and being able to work within that space in a confident and reliable way would be
mm,
really helpful for people who are on the internet at all. So tell me
mhm.
more about that. What do you do in emotional agility? How do you define that? What does that look like? What are some of the tools that go into play there?
Yeah. And I think that's really insightful what you said. Obviously, this is your wheelhouse, but I haven't thought about that before. There's too many people and too much abstract information on the internet
Hmm.
that's not really connecting us with our bodies, with
Mm.
our environments.
Hmm.
And so one of the
Yeah.
first things when you talk about emotion in the category of emotional intelligence, really pioneered by Daniel Goleman, he talked about the two primary competencies of emotional intelligence. The first one being self-awareness,
Hmm.
and the second one being self-management.
Makes sense. Yep.
Because you can't manage yourself without being aware of yourself,
Yep.
and we naturally think we are, but we aren't.
Right.
And so we all have blind spots. We're all in a spectrum.
Yep.
And one of the places that I start with people, and that we've had a conversation about this before,
Yes.
is how do you experience life? Well, you experience it through your senses,
Yes.
particularly through your five senses, and generally
Which are all
primarily,
bodily senses.
yeah, yeah, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're touching,
Hmm.
tactile, what you're tasting and what you're smelling as well.
Hmm.
And so when we go from step to step, when we're interacting with life, it's our senses that are really serving as the building blocks that are forming our memories.
Mm-hmm.
And so I usually work with people first getting in touch with that.
Mm-hmm.
Is what are you seeing? What are you hearing? If you have say a belief,
Mm-hmm.
right, about yourself, about being successful or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have memories that you're going to remember. And if I ask you to pull them up, I'm going to ask, what did you see? What did you hear in those memories?
Mm-hmm.
And that will form the information that you actually use to form that belief.
Mm-hmm.
So I might be going off on a bit of
No, that's
tangent
great.
here.
That's great. And I think one thing when I commented earlier about the importance of this emotional awareness and its tie to our bodies is so critical, because like I mentioned, like when you're online, you're not only is just all these bits of information coming at you from all directions, it's all very abstract, like you said. And it's easy for us to forget that we even have a body, right? And we just distracted from it and distanced from it. And we get so caught up in all these dialogues and conflicts and things like that, that we're just operating by default in a very reactive state. And we get so, I love the XKCD comic of the guy who's sitting on his computer furiously typing away in the midnight, and his wife's like, when are you going to come to bed? It's like, no, I have to work this. There's somebody wrong on the internet. Like, there's always going to be somebody wrong on the internet. No matter what you do, there's always going to be somebody wrong on the internet. And so that impulse of this overblown importance of every little argument interaction online. Some of them are important because they're people that are actually relationally involved with you. But so often the case that it's not really all that important. And when we recontextualize and be aware of our emotional impact that we're having, oftentimes gets us when we are forgetting that we're in this spot, in this place, in this body, rather than a person impacted by all these people out on the internet. So gaining this sense of awareness of our own bodies seems really critical to me.
That makes sense. And when we're interacting with people, like, because it's decontextualized, the internet. If I'm living life, if we didn't have the internet, right, we'd go out to town and we would meet, 5 to 10
over
people.
Food.
We'd meet a few people and we'd interact with them, and that would be our experiences.
Yeah.
But online, there's so many people. It's too many for our brains to really process well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also how the internet, a lot of the Facebook and Instagram are designed to be addictive. They're designed to draw us in so that we spend, or video games, so that we spend 20 plus hours a day on them, and really form this attachment where then your ability to grow emotionally then is stunted.
Yeah. There's not
because
quality over quantity over quality, in a sense. There's so many interactions that it's hard to have a specific deep interaction.
Yeah. And one of the reasons coaching is powerful is because it's bringing back the reflection. It's doing it within the context of a relationship, but helping a person to say, okay, there's too much information, there's too much activity. We live in such a busy world. I need a space. And what good coaches do is give a person that space to take a step back, to see the big picture, to ask, what are my values? What's really important here? Where am I going with all I'm doing? What am I doing that's purposeful and meaningful? And to have that space to reflect is so important.
Yeah, I love that. So true. It's one reason why I find coaching as such a rewarding profession. So what are some practical exercises, like maybe even like almost self-coaching exercises that people can do in the moment to help them reconnect with their emotions in their body, in a sense? If they're feeling that fragmentation online and they're wanting to recenter on the relationships, what are some ideas that can help there possibly? Questions they could ask.
A couple exercises, like very basic but also very powerful, are the first one would be deep breathing.
Oh yes, absolutely.
And so if feel that addiction and that pull, just to stop and take 10 deep breaths, take 20 deep breaths, And that really slows your emotional, anxiety down. So, okay, now I can think a bit more clearly. So that would be one just quick in the
Yes.
moment tool. And another one that's similar, takes a bit of time, is more the meditation or prayer,
Mm-hmm.
which does require a person to step back again and tap into the deeper things in their soul, and have that time and space to process.
Mm-hmm.
And so those would be two quick tools that I
Yes.
would just say off the top of my head.
I love that. I love that. So one of the other things that we brought up, and I think it would be kind of fun to bring in here, particularly we're talking about relationships and how important relationships are in this, and
Mhm.
how we're designed to experience emotions. I kind of running back through our conversation and kind of summarizing it in many ways, uh, how much our emotions are designed to be part of relational contexts, right? They're not things that we experience in isolation or in too much abstraction.
Mhm.
They're the music, the symphony of an orchestra of people. They work together in that synergy together in that relationship. And one of the things we mentioned earlier is when you're talking with your pastor about how to contextualize what coaching is and how that relates to relationships. Could you talk on that briefly?
The so we were talking about the ancient Hebrew word
Yes.
shalom, which relates to the English word we translate, what is peace. And
Yes.
peace is really, when we hear it and we say it in the English language, generally it misses a lot of its meaning,
Lack of conflict. This is
right?
kind
Lack of conflict,
of
or even just a picture of a still, quiet lake,
yeah.
on a morning without ripples.
Yes.
But true peace is really rightly ordered, to be rightly ordered. And in my conversation with my pastor about coaching, it was that shalom has four fundamental relationships attached to the word. And so there's the relationship that you have with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
the relationship that you have with others,
Mm-hmm.
the relationship you have with the world,
Mm-hmm.
work and creation,
Mm-hmm.
and the relationship that you have with God. And
Mm-hmm.
so true shalom, true peace, then is seen within the context of these four relationships.
Yeah.
And so when I do my work, my coaching,
Mm-hmm.
what I really help people do, of course, it's within the context of person to person relationship, but I
Yep.
really help them to heal and to work on their relationship with themselves,
Yeah.
and to come to that place of abundance and health.
And reconnect in an ordered way. And one of the things about that concept of ordered, because a lot of us in our modernistic, mechanistic society, we think of ordered as like machines in a row, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or cogs or a
Right,
chessboard
right.
grid or something like that. Whereas in the ancient concept, when something is said to be ordered, it means more like it's alive. Like our bodies
Yes.
are well ordered, they're well constructed, right? They are in their proper place doing their proper things. They bring forth more life. So there's like if you think of like static and chaos, like I was saying with the internet, right? That's like the opposite of a orderly life
Mm-hmm.
bringing being, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the
Harmony.
idea of something that's sterile and linear and reduced down to parts is actually almost more chaotic than ordered in a
Mm-hmm.
life-giving sense because it's sterile, right? And something sterile is not life, not doesn't give life by definition. And so this
Mm-hmm.
idea of these relationships isn't just that there's a constraint put on them, but that there's openness and possibility, and all
Yeah.
of these creative opportunities are open to us within these properly ordered relationships and roles in these
Yeah.
four dimensions. So
Well
shalom
said.
is peace, yes, but it's not just like the static quiet of a untouched lake.
Mm.
Um, it's the peace and joy and vibrancy of a tree of life.
Right. Right. Or of an orchestra and all the
Yes.
different players playing in synchrony and
Yes.
harmony.
Yes.
Hmm.
Exactly.
That's a beautiful picture.
Yeah. And that's I think that coaching is such a beautiful tool for helping to bring order in that life-giving abundance into people's lives and helping them to see where the chaos is and how to tame it in a
Hmm.
sense. but finding these exercises as we are, interacting with things that do tend towards chaos, finding ways to engage with them in a way that brings life. So thinking about in concept of relationships, thinking about that in context of online, what are some thoughts that you have as far as how can we bring more shalom into our lives when we're engaging in kind of this chaotic static of fractal relationships that are online?
Yeah. Well, a person would need healthy rhythms, right? Healthy patterns of engaging in each one of these four relationships. And yeah, there's time for online, but there's a time to shut down the computer.
Yes.
There's a time to turn off the phone.
Balance.
And to go for a walk, right? To walk, in nature. And yeah, as I mentioned, my wheelhouse is really diving into that relationship with yourself.
Yes.
And so rightly, your beliefs or your paradigms, how you're interpreting the world, and in ways that, oftentimes when a person has a recurring negative feeling about themselves, about a situation, usually that's a signal. It's a signal saying, hey, pay attention to me, pay attention to me. And when you do, there's information there. It's the positive message behind a negative emotion that's going to lead you to greater health. That's going to lead you to living in, better relationship with yourself, and then also better relationships in those other three areas.
Could you touch on that more, talking about, because this is something that I think I know what you're talking about, particularly in terms as a coach, because I use a similar tool. But some of our listeners might not be aware of this concept of the positive value that's behind the negative. Can you elaborate more on that, about that concept of what are the things that you're for that's causing you to have that fear trigger?
So for example, when a person has a negative feeling or a negative sense that maybe it's a disappointment, maybe it's a frustration, maybe it's a guilt, right? It could be fear and anger as well. All of that, oftentimes, people will just sit with that and they'll move forward and they'll continue on that feeling, and it might lead down. Yeah, and I've been there. It lead me down a path of rumination, or lead me, I should be doing work, but instead I'm procrastinating. I'm thinking about this conversation that I didn't like how it went.
Yeah.
But this is where self-awareness is key, is to actually stop, to put on the brakes. Hey, there's something, I'm feeling something bad, and to explore it. And what I have found is that every negative emotion is just a doorway. It's like the lights on a dashboard in a car that says, hey, check under the hood. There's something that needs to be checked on, something that needs to be checked on. If there's a frustration, it's, hey, there's an expectation that I had that's violated. What do I need to do here? Maybe I need to change my expectations, or maybe I need to take action. And so that way, that negative feeling is giving you a purpose here. If there's I'm afraid, I've experienced social anxieties. Well, what's that actually saying? There's a desire that I have for safety, and we can continue to unpack that. Oftentimes it's a desire for peace. Okay, well, that's a positive thing. That's a good thing. And so to be able to embrace that, and to don't run away. So to all your listeners, Jaymes, don't run away from your negative emotions, but pause and listen to them and say, hey, what's going on here? And really take them seriously, so that you can process and come to a place of more full health and a more full experience.
Yeah. That was one thing that I mentioned in our pre-show conversation about how, if you want to go a little bit for a few steps into the theology of it, evil is always derivative. It's never self generative. Evil is always something that is a broken or a twistedness of something that was good. So if you look at something that's negative or destructive or painful, there's always a direction in it that can point us back to the thing that is good, the shalom that is disordered, right? That we can go back into and find that direction. So if we're feeling these emotions, if we try to mask them and hide them, we're just leaving that disorder sitting in our lives, right? Instead of entering into it to find out what's the path back to order, what's the path back to life, what's the path back to shalom here. Which is it's just a powerful perspective, because then we can learn and grow. That's one thing I talk about all the time, about that we're designed to grow under stress. Like, we're designed, that's why we exercise, that's why we go through, that's why God lets hard things into our lives, so that we can grow from them and draw close to him, right? So when we approach hardship in the world with that perspective of, I can grow from this, then like burnout's not even an issue anymore, because burnout is just stress that we aren't growing from.
Yeah.
That's really all it is. And so finding this to go back to and find that value that's at the root of those fears, of those pains, those frustrations, is really, really powerful. So what are some of the discoveries that you've had in connection with that? Like, when you're helping map out people's, value systems, are there any patterns that you've noticed that are like insightful, or have something to speak towards our society?
So when I'm helping people identify their values, there's not that many. When you get to the higher level values, there's not that many really on the high levels. People are often searching for the same things. They're searching for joy. They're searching for peace. They're searching for connection with others. You could call it love. And so usually there's just a handful, like probably between 5 and 10 of those high level values that everyone is searching for in their own way.
Yeah.
And it's really neat, and to be able to recognize that, to say, hey, every person, every conflict, usually people are after something. The values behind the conflict, even if it seems unreconcilable, if those who are in conflict were able to chunk back to say, hey, what's our value system behind this? That would open up so many doorways for collaboration.
Yeah, the common ground there that is so beautiful, so profound.
Yeah.
So have you actually done like arbitration, or like when you're working between different groups to help them deal with conflicts by going down to the root values of each group and showing them that commonality? Have you done anything like that before?
Ooh, that would be interesting. I'd be up for it. I've worked with a number of individuals who have been in conflict and helping them to take a step back and grow in that self-awareness.
Yeah.
But I haven't done arbitration.
That'd be interesting. I know I've never done it as like a formal professional thing. But like you, like I'll be working on one side of the argument. And I don't know when I started doing this. I started like a principle or a rule a ways back, that whenever I'm talking with somebody and they're talking about somebody else, whether it's positive or negative, I always bias towards the defense of the person who's not there. Right. And as a general pattern of rule. And what that's often turned into is if somebody comes to me, they're in a conflict or they're frustrated and they're trying to figure out how to deal with it. And they're just like grumping and complaining about this other person. And I don't know the other person from Adam oftentimes. But they'll like be throwing out suggestions like, hey, I wonder if they were coming out from this perspective, or I wonder if this might be their motivation there, or maybe they meant that instead of this, or helping the other person think through possibilities of ways to assume positive intent. And bringing that voice into the conversation. The people get annoyed at me for it. Like, why are you taking their side? Like, well, they're not here. That's why.
So you can frame it as a question. You can say, hey, what do you think they were really looking for when they did that?
Yeah, exactly. Yep. It's a good skill to have, to be able to ask those kinds of questions, to dig in to their values, kind of on their behalf, but assuming that positive intent, which is so critical. Going back to the kind of the theme of online interactions, because we typically don't assume positive intent to people we're interacting with online. We behave almost as if they're not even human. Sometimes they're just a word or a name on a page, instead of an actual full human.
Yeah, there's probably something psychological behind that.
Probably. I think it has to do with like the lack of dimensionality. Like we normally encounter people fully dimensioned, where we can touch them, we can smell them, we can hear them, we can eat with them in the same place, and there's this fully dimensioned interaction. And then when we're interacting, even here we have face expressions, we have body language, we have voice, we have all these different things, and we're synchronous at the same time. We can see each other's the time dimension as well, right? Whereas if you're interacting on Facebook, right, you don't have any of that. You just have text asynchronously, no reaction, no time connection, no dimensionality whatsoever. And so it's what your assumptions are. What you project into it is what you're going to see there.
Yeah.
And that's where this connection comes in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what are some other thoughts that you have around the idea of emotional agility, and different ways that you can develop that skill?
Yeah. So the what I was mentioning earlier was the how you respond to negative emotions, right?
Yep.
Instead of reacting or pushing it away or just ignoring it, giving it that space. When we talk about positive emotions, if you want to change your results, right, you need to change your behaviors.
Yes.
And one of the most powerful ways to change that behavior is to get in a different emotional state, right? And so to have habits of gratitude and to celebrate your accomplishments, those are good. Those are good just as far as building those thresholds, right? Something to do daily or weekly. Say, hey, what are the things that I'm grateful for? What are the things that that I have accomplished that I can celebrate? Especially high achievers. Jaymes, this is one of the problems of high achievers, is we're always seeing what we do wrong, what we can do better.
Yeah.
And sometimes you need to stop and say, no, hey, I actually did a whole bunch of things well. Let me just stop and sit in that good feeling and say, good job, Orrin, I did a good job.
Yeah. That one's really critical for burnout. I was just talking to somebody earlier today about this particular concept, because there's like the three components of burnout. There's the overwhelm, there's the disconnect from people around you, and there's what I call inefficacy, which is the lack of a sense of meaningful accomplishment, which is what comes into imposter syndrome. We internalize this lack of meaningful accomplishment, and that gets expressed as imposter syndrome typically. There's other possible reasons for that trends more towards therapy and whatnot, but in general, a large portion, that's the connection there. But a lot of that oftentimes is not the fact that we're not actually doing things that are meaningful or accomplished, right? It's just that we haven't noticed them or we don't remember them. We aren't paying enough attention to them, or they're just outside of our personality range. I call it the working motivational memory. So we have like a particular range within which that we think time is real. If it's too far ahead, it's not real. We don't work on it, and then we get close to it. And, I need to work on that. That's where a lot of procrastination comes from.
Interesting.
And so some people they see all the events out to 3 months out. Some people only see within 5 minutes. Right. Like mine's around 6 hours. My wife's around 2 weeks. Kind of thing, like she's like, oh, we need to start working on this. I'm like, oh, that thing exists. Oh, right, yeah. So I use to-do lists and calendars to keep track of things. Otherwise, my life would be more insane than it is. But then the similar is there's a backwards direction too, where we look back in time to remember things that we've done. And so if it goes past that range, it doesn't really feel real anymore. Like I did that last year, or I did that 10 years ago. That's not really me anymore. Right. So if it's shorter, like if it's 3 days, and you have a longer cycle on significant accomplishments, like say you're a real estate agent or something like that, and you get a big sale, several times a year, but not several a day, then you might have a big struggle with imposter syndrome because you're not remembering or experiencing success on a regular basis within your range of memory.
Yeah.
Sense. There's a bunch of other aspects to it too, but that sense of being intentional about taking the time to celebrate those wins and bring them into your experience regularly is so critical for dealing with not just burnout, but imposter syndrome, and being able to share know what your values are and that you're living up to them. It's really critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that was really good. I want to hear more about this after.
Sure. I have a few webinars.
Yeah. Another thing, I would say as far as being forward focused,
Yes.
one of the things that I work on with my clients is visualizing your goals,
Hmm.
right? So lots of people talk about smart goals, specific,
Yes.
measurable, etc.
Hmm.
And the purpose of the specific, really the first part of
Hmm.
the SMART acronym is really if you have a goal that you're working towards, get into the tactile, as we were talking about earlier. What are you going to see when you reach your goal? What are
Mm.
you going to see, hear? What are you going to feel? And
Yes.
and and when you can visualize that, that helps. It helps. It almost builds a place of where your mind has a comfort zone, so
Hmm.
that when you're moving towards your goal, it doesn't feel so unfamiliar. I don't know if I can do this, but it's like I've been here before. Though
Hmm.
maybe in my imagination, I've been here before. I know what this is like, and that helps give you that motivation and move you
Yeah.
towards it.
Was it you who also mentioned that when you are visualizing your future, it's important to not only visualize your success, but visualize the potential obstacles that come into play?
Yeah, and yeah,
Yeah. Talk
David
more about that.
Goggins talks about this in his book "Can't Hurt Me,"
Hmm.
and I love this because so he talked about visualize your the obstacles that you have and visualize yourself overcoming them.
Hmm.
And so I took this. I really like this,
Hmm.
and so when I'm working with clients, I do my process and then add this on as well,
Hmm.
because oftentimes it's the obstacles or the perceived
Yeah.
challenges that are going to sideline you, that are
Yeah.
going to get you down in a rut. And so
Yeah.
to really think through specifically, visualizing is going to help you think through
Yeah.
how you're going to actually overcome those
Mhm.
challenges.
Because if you only visualize the success and then you encounter an obstacle, then it's like, oh, this you get this cognitive dissonance, like, oh, this is not what I
Yeah.
was imagining. And then you get this excuse to bail out. Whereas if you've already visualized even failure, if you've and then getting back up again, you visualize getting distracted, then when that happens, like, ah, yes, I've planned for this.
Mhm.
It's like it doesn't take you by surprise.
Mhm.
And you get that extra level of commitment at the beginning. And I really love this. It's really beautiful because it trains us into that growth mindset that
Mhm.
obstacles are there to be grown through,
Mhm.
right? We preparing for that rather than a Pollyanna approach of everything's always nice, because life is not always nice. We go have but we can triumph over the disorder and evil in the world, and through that get to shalom.
Yeah. Well said.
I love that. Well, that's really great stuff. I really appreciate you taking the time to jump on my podcast here and talk about these things. I think this is really important, critical particularly for today's world,
Mhm.
being able to get back in touch in a meaningful, constructive way with our emotions and with our bodies and how we do that.
Mhm.
So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, James.
Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you had your curiosity sparked to explore these subjects with greater awareness or gained a valuable insight along the way. Take a look at the show notes for links for how you can get a hold of Orrin, read reviews wherever you can, and make sure to join the conversation on my Discord. Remember, community is the catalyst that drives lasting transformation. I'll see you in the next episode of Catalytic Curiosity.